Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, how are you today? Hopefully you all in a good condition. The Honorable our lecturer, Mr. Rifqi, and all of our beloved friends. We are from the 5th group. I am Ratna Irawati and my partner is Syamsudin. We would like to present about clause S representation in this SFL subject. The first one, we would like to discuss about modeling experience of change. There are 3 metafunctional lines of meaning. As you can see, just put the sentence, well usually means mostly, doesn't it, Mary? Let's discuss about this sentence. Textually, the clause well usually means mostly, doesn't it, Mary? Presents a message as a new term in response to a query, the continuative well concerned with an English word usually that has just been queried. This is the theme of the message. The topical theme established in this clause is maintained as the theme of the next clause and is elaborated further within the rime. Theme it, a rime means more often than not. The second is interpersonally, the clause enacts a proposition. A consultative statement realized by a declarative usually means, doesn't it, that is explicitly addressed to a particular person, Mary. Vocative, Mary. This statement has been prompted by Danu's query of usually and it elicits a response from Mary, adjusting the proposition. The nub of the argument is realized by the subject of clause and the finite fixes it as present in relation to the nous of speaking. Usually means, doesn't it, it means. And the third, experientially, the clause construes a quantum of change as a feature or configuration of a process, participants involved in it, and any attendant circumstances. In the example, the clause construes a relationship of signification between a word and its meaning, usually signifies, represents, expresses, mostly. There are 3 elements in this relationship, usually, means, and mostly. One of these elements is the process of meaning. This process is represented as being located in and unfolding through time. The process is realized by a verb marked for present tense, contrasting with past mean and future will mean. The other 2 elements are participants involved in the process of meaning. One of them represents the expression usually and the other its meaning mostly. These participants are the token and value in the relationship of signification. Come to the types of process. As we can see, there are 3 world abstract relation, being, sensing, and doing. Sensing is world of consciousness, doing is physical world. Being, world of abstract relation. In abstract relation, we can see the relational, having attribute, having identity, and symbolizing. In verbal, we can say that saying. In sensing, we can call it mental, thinking, feeling, seeing, and behavioral, behaving. In doing, we can say it in material, happening or being created, creating, changing, doing to acting, and existential, existing. Talking about process, participant, and circumstances, the process typically realized by verbal group, the participant typically realized by nominal group, and the circumstances typically realized by adverbial group or prepositional phrase. Let's take an example. Can you tell us about the political and cultural makeup of Nigeria? Can is process, that is verbal. You, participant, that is nominal group. Tell is circumstances. As participant, about the political and cultural makeup of Nigeria is circumstance or prepositional phrase. Next, we will discuss about the material clauses, processes of doing and happening. The first one, introductory examples. Material clauses are clauses of doing and happening. A material clause construes a quantum of change in the flow of events as taking place through some input of energy. Example, each year, replace the fruiting rod by tying down a lateral in its place. Either tie down one shoot and cut it off where it meets the next line, or tie down 2, one each way, and cut them where they meet the neighboring lateral. This is called the double guyot. The material clauses construe the procedure as a sequence of concrete changes in the trees brought about by the person being instructed. The implicit you, which could be made explicit as in you replace the fruiting root in the example above, and in material clauses in general, the source of the energy bringing about the change is typically a participant, the actor. Next, transitive and intransitive material clauses. We can see the table. A is happening represented by an intransitive material clause and the B table is doing represented by a transitive material clause. As we can see, the lion sprang. The lion is actor or nominal group. Sprang is process, verbal group. And in the B table, the lion caught the tourist. The lion is actor, nominal group. Caught, process or verbal group. And the tourist is goal, nominal group. And then the types of doing and happening. As we can see in the table, type of doing, there are transformative and creative. Transformative type of outcome, elaborating, extending, enhancing, and creative, cleansing, a client. In elaborating qualitative, there are qualitative outcome, resultative attribute, and resultative rule. You can see this table to understand it. And next, the different types of material clauses and additional participants. We can see the table. I gave my love a ring that has no end. I, as actor, gave its process my love recipient a ring that has no end. It is the material clause with recipient. Next, concrete and abstract material clause. We can see the two schools combined. The two schools is actor, combined is process. And we can see beside that, the two schools were combined. The two schools become a goal here because were combined, become a process. And the third one, we will discuss about mental clauses, the processes of sensing. The introductory examples of mental clauses. Pat said, I had cockroaches more than rats. Pauline, I don't like cockroaches either. Pat, I remember we were sitting for our analytical chemistry exam, and it was the final exams, and they have sort of like bench desks where there's 3 to a bench normally, and they had the middle seat empty and 2 sat either side, and I was sitting there and thought, geez, I can feel something on my foot, and I thought, no, don't worry about it. The bold word here is the examples of mental clauses. Next, the interpreting mental clauses, we can see the table. Mary liked the gift. Mary as goal, the tourist, liked process without by the line. Mary and the tourist as a goal, liked and was count as process, the gift and by the lion as actor. Here there are 2 sentences, and the gift, the lion is actor, pleased and count as the process. Mary and the tourist is a goal. Next, properties of mental clauses. There are 5. The nature of the sensor. For example, Mary likes the gift. The second, phenomenon. The phenomenon may be not only a thing, but also an act or effect. And the third is projection. The projected clause is called an idea clause. The fourth is process, the system of tense. We know that there are 16 tenses. And the last one, substitute verb, doing processes. Next is type of sensing. As you can see in this tab, in this figure, you can see it, mental type of sensing, higher and lower. There, from higher we can see cognitive and desiderative, lower perceptive and emotive, and so on. Okay, the last one of my part, I would to invite you to discuss about relational clauses, the processes of being and having. The first one, nature of relational clauses. We can see the inner and outer experience constituted by different process types. Inner experience, there are no material doing. For outer experience, the material or doing, we can see the example. She is walking into the dining room. She is getting a mahogany table. She is emptying the bottle. For the mental or sensing, the inner experience, she rejoices, she fears stupidity, his behavior amuses her, stupidity frightens her, and there are no outer experience here. For relational or being, the inner experience, we can say she is happy, she is afraid of stupidity, his behavior is amusing to her, stupidity is frightening to her. And the outer experience, she is in the dining room, she has a mahogany table, the bottle's empty. And the principal types of relational clause, the principal categories of relational clause, we can see the attributive. A is an attributive of X, and identifying A is the identified of X. For intensive X, X is A, Sarah is wise. This is attributive. In identifying, Sarah is the leader is Sarah. In the possessive, attributive, Peter has a piano, identifying the piano is Peter's. Peter's is the piano. In circumstantial attributive, the first is on Tuesday, identifying tomorrow is the 10th is tomorrow. And the intensive clauses, attributive, characteristic of attributive intensive clauses, we can see the table of intensive attribution. The class denoted by the attribute may be defined by reference to an entity or to a quality. The process of attribution may be natural or paced. The domain of attribution may be either material or semiotic. Let's come to the intensive clauses. There are 4. A general characteristic represent a strategy for expanding the naming resources of language in both everyday discourse and technical or scientific discourse. Token and value can be characterized as a stratal one of expression and content. Subtypes of identifying clause are duopoly in that it tends to dominate in certain highly valued registers. And the last one, summary of attributive and identifying or intensive clauses. In attribution, some entity is being said to have an attribute. The last one, circumstantial and possessive clauses. Let's say about circumstantial first. Circumstantial clauses. There are two, attributive and identifying. In attributive, circumstance as attribute and circumstance as process. In identifying, circumstance as participants and circumstance as process. In possessive clauses, only two, attributive and identifying. In attributive, possession as attribute and possession as process. Identifying, possession as participants and possession as process.
In the previous video, you have learning about background and material about clause as representation, and in this occasion, I would like to explain a bit about example. Clause as representation, or system of additional meaning, is the grammatical system for imposing order on the endless variation and flow of event constitutes the world of experience. It is according to Halliday in page 170. The system of additional meaning is how we experience and interpret the world around us. For the EFL, the important implication of this is that language is not an abstract set of tools to talk about experience. Language is our experience of the world, the semiotic space within which we operate as human beings. The grammar of experience divided the words into three different semiotic spaces. The first one is the physical world, the second one, the world of abstract relations, and the last is the world of consciousness. Each of the semiotic space has its own prototypical process types. Importantly, however, is the concept of indeterminacy. The semiotic space are not exclusive but are fused and set into one another. This fact can be particularly frustrating for EFL learner. We can see in the table 5.23, inner and outer experience constructed by different process types. These are processes of typically human, psychological and psychological behavior, like breathing, coughing, smiling, dreaming, and staring. They are the least distinct of all the 6 process types because they have no clearly defined characteristic of. Then, we can see in the table 5.24 example of verb serving as process in behavioral clauses. Many of these verbs also occur non-behaviorally. Construct think as behavioral process, and be quiet and thinking we think as mental process. In they think we are stupid. Behavioral processes are almost always middle. The most typical pattern is a clause consisting of behavior and process only, like don't breathe, no one listening, he's always grumbling. A common variant of this is that where the behavior is dressed up as it was a participant, like she sang a song, he gave a great yarn. The structure is typical in the everyday spoken language. The participant is analog to the scope of a material clause, but being manifestation of the general function of range. We shall call it behavior. And then certain types of circumstance are associated with behavioral processes. Those of matter with group 1 and 2, for example, dreaming of you grumbled about the food manner with the reminder. For example, breathe deeply, sit up straight. Some of those is group 1 until 3 also regularly feature a prepositional phrase with to, at, or on. I'm talking to you, don't look at me. Fortune is smiling on us. They are in original circumstance of place. In the behavioral context, they express orientation, but we might continue to use that label. The verb watch is anomalous. In I'm watching you, the tense suggests a behavioral process, but the you appears as a participant, like the phenomenon of a mental clause. Since this is restricted to watch, we can label this participant as phenomenon, indicating the mental analog. Finally, while behavioral clause doesn't project, indicate indirect speech or thought, they often appear in a functional narrative introducing direct speech, as many as of attaching a behavioral feature to the verbal process of saying. Next, we can see in the table 5.27 process type, their meaning and characteristic participant. We began this chapter with the concept of process types, taking in the process function together with those participant functions which were critical to the distinction between one process type and another. We now come to the circumstantial elements which lie at the other end of the continuum. Typically, they occur fairly in all types of process and with essentially the same significance wherever they occur. There are, of course, some combinations which are less likely and some spatial interpretation. For example, circumstances of matter are fairly common with mental and verbal clauses, but quite rare with the other process types, except for certain behavioral clauses and in an attributive clause. Manner circumstances are fairly unusual, and circumstances of plane often carry a feature of time as well. For example, I get hungry on the beach when I'm on the beach, but these tend to be rather specific, and we shall not deal with them here. The next is about type of circumstance. The first one is extent and location. In the table, the circumstantial of extent and location construe the unfolding of the process in the space and time. They form a form term set as shown in table 5.29. The first one is about extent. Extent construe the extent of the unfolding of the process in space-time, the distance in space over which the process unfolds, or the duration in time during which the process unfolds. The interrogative form for extent are how far, how long, how many times. The typical structure is a nominal group with quantifier, either divided, for example, 5 days, or indefinite, many miles a long way. This occur either with or without preposition. And the second one about location construes the location of the unfolding of the process in space-time, the place where it unfolds and the time when it unfolds. The general interrogative of location are where, when. Place includes not only static location in space but also the source, path, and destination of movement. Similarly, time includes not only static location in time but also the temporal analogs of source, path, and destination. The next types about manner. The circumstantial element of manner construe the way in which the process of actualized manner comprises four subcategories: means, quality, comparison, and degree. This cover a considerable range. Means it close to the some kind of process, whereas quality and degree are like features of the process itself. These differences in status are reflected in realizational tendencies. Means and comparisons tend to be realized by prepositional phrases, whereas quality and comparison tend to be realized by adverbial groups. And the last about cause. The circumstantial element of cause construe the reason why the process is actualized. It includes not only reason in the narrow sense of existing condition leading to the actualization of the process, but also purpose in the sense of intended condition for which the process is actualized. Both reason and purpose tend to be even time. And are therefore commonly construed as clauses in a clause nexus, but there is another kind of clause that tend to denote a person. The circumstance of behalf clause does comprise three subcategories: reason, purpose, and behalf. That's all for me. Thanks for watching, and I hope it can be useful in the future. Thank you.
Well, friends, that's all of our presentation. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and we are sorry for our mistake. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you.